another way to think about Twitter and why people are there and how you should use it is that one of the big value propositions we bring to people who use Twitter, people who tweet or listen, is that it's so simple. It's so easy to consume a lot of content. And so when we look at our design, again, we have to stay true to that. And so it's been interesting. Yesterday, I did my first day of meetings with brands and agencies, and the question we always get is, what new products are you going to roll out? And the reality is that our products, the way that they exist right now, are performing really well for us because of their simplicity. Because you have the same experience on your desktop that you have in your mobile, that's good for people, that's good for us. And so when we looked at our product design, we actually designed it within the experience. We could have done banner ads and we could have slammed something on the top, and we certainly had those options, but we thought that if we could build it within the platform, that was the opportunity. 3 products that we have. The first is promoted accounts, so you'll see that on the far left side in the upper hand corner. Your experience on Twitter is only as good as who you follow, so people are always looking for new people to follow. The opportunity we offer to brands is that you can suggest to people to follow you. You can target your consumer, depending on all kinds of things, the kind of device they use, their gender, their interests, other signals that they send, so that you're finding the right people. The second sort of product is the promoted tweet, right? The tweet within the timeline. And we created this because you think about when brands used to write tweets, before we had promoted tweets, before we had these products, and they would write this great tweet with this great piece of content. And that was great for the people who happened to log in at 11:03 when the tweet went out. But say somebody logged in at 2 o'clock and they missed your great tweet and they were totally the right person who should have seen that tweet. The promoted tweet allows you to pin a tweet within the top of a timeline for somebody who follows you or somebody who looks like they might follow you based on their profile. And so this allows you to get to people who look like they should receive that message. And we recently rolled out keyword targeting. So now you can target people based on the kinds of things that they're talking about, that moment in time when they're most likely and most ready to hear a message from your brand. So somebody shopping for jeans that weekend could get a tweet from a retailer saying tips for finding the perfect jeans in that moment in time as they're talking about it. The last product that we have is the promoted trend. So something that we saw evolve on Twitter is this idea of these conversations that were happening around the hashtag and trying to understand what people are talking about that moment in time. So different trending topics, as we know, each day depending on the news of the day. When events happen in the real world, they happen on Twitter. And so this gives brands the opportunity to be at the top of that list of conversations. And we've seen a lot of innovation with that in how people sort of curate a conversation for a day. We often see folks tie it to big events. They tie it to holidays. They tie it to launches, and are very creative in sort of how they're bringing people into that conversation and inspiring interaction with it. Also, in looking at innovation and that idea of simplicity and constraint, Vine was something that made absolute sense for us. It was interesting when Instagram was acquired by Facebook. Our CEO got a lot of questions from folks saying, what photo service are you going to acquire? And his point of view, which I think is fantastic, and it's not just because he's the CEO, don't tell him I said that, is that you don't move forward by looking at the people next to you. And so for a long time, when we were looking at how we evolve and where we innovate, we were trying to figure out how we could take video and make it simpler and easier to consume. And so being able to do it in 6 seconds within the timeline in this very elegant way seemed to make sense to us. And just this week, Samsung announced the launch of Android Vine app being available and did it in a way to highlight their own product. It was a global trend that they purchased to let people know that it was here. And they got a lot of credit for how they use Vine to highlight the product. We've also seen brands do things where they're creating Vine series. They're figuring out a way to create something that feels specific to them. It sort of has a look and a feel and an approach that they can sort of own. So French Connection actually hired an animator to create a series featuring different clothes. And this is something that they do in many different ways, featuring different outfits of the season. Lowe's is a home goods store for do-it-yourselfers. And so they do the Lowe's Fix and Six, and these are small little tips in terms of how that are relative to the chief household officer. So they'll target people who are talking about painting on the weekend and do-it-yourself products and hit them with these tweets. It might not be specific to painting on the weekend, but it's specific to that person and the kinds of things they do within their household. What we've seen is Lowe's has gotten a ton of attention from the media for this. There's a huge reward for brands that do things well or do things first. There's just a lot of focus right now to see where innovation is happening. So that was a big win for them. And then finally, any guesses what the mariachi Doritos song was? It's oh so quiet. So Doritos hired a mariachi band for Easter and had them do different covers, mariachi style, of different popular songs. Again, fun entertainment, quickly consumed, plays really well, and their brand is a brand that can have fun. So we're seeing a lot of interesting play happen there with brands on Vine. Want to also talk about the pattern that we see with Twitter and TV. So what's been interesting from the beginning of Twitter is that we could see what shows were on because people would be tweeting about it. We knew when certain movies were airing because people were talking about it. And so a few years back, we started to build out our media team because the broadcasters, the networks, the shows, actually saw that Twitter was driving tune-in. So they wanted our thoughts on how they could better integrate into their programming to drive that tune-in. So it started there. And what's interesting about TV and Twitter is that it makes sense when you think about, again, the fact that we're open, public, unfiltered. So everyone can kind of see what people are talking about on Twitter. So you think about connecting to your interests, and people who are watching that same game or that same reality show, you can connect to other people having that conversation and see what they're saying on Twitter. We know that half of the people on Twitter tweet while they're watching TV. So that's pretty important and powerful when you think about the opportunity there for brands, right? And all that they do to be present on TV, whether it's sponsorships of TV shows or if it's just ads during the commercial break. And the question that we sometimes get from advertisers is, how do you predict against TV? Yeah, you might have a commercial spot, but you don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the voice, right? You don't know who's going to win. You don't know who's going to score in a football game. But what we've seen is actually different shows have very predictable tweet patterns. And so if you're watching a drama, there will be a spike in tweets at the very beginning as people sort of talk about what happened last week and what might happen this week. And then they watch, and then there's a spike in tweets as people talk about what just happened in the show and what might happen next week. It's repeatable. It happens every show that sort of sits in the drama category. Soap operas, there's a slow build, and then there's a cliffhanger, and then people drop off, right? That's another sort of predictable pattern. Documentaries, we see a steady flow of tweets as people are sort of talking and watching and relaying facts or interesting things that they're seeing. And I think what proves this out the most is we were looking at the movie 17 again, which was airing on 2 different channels, 2 different days, 2 different times. But if you look at the tweets, it's exactly the same pattern. So again, you can really predict. And so you think about this and how you apply this sort of thinking as a brand, right? And just saw a really smart activation come through from a retailer. We were meeting with Target, and they were about to have a big moment at an award show. Award shows are great for Twitter. We love them because Beyonce will say she's pregnant, or Kanye West will say something really stupid, and that's really great for us because we see a spike in tweets. And so we know that these big moments are going to happen. We don't know what they are, but we know that they'll be there. And so we were meeting with Target and their CMO, and they were going to do a big announcement at the Grammys. Justin Timberlake was rolling out his new album. Target was creating a special album that had 2 additional tracks that you could buy at Target. And so Justin was going to perform, their ad was going to air, and their question to us was, how do we use Twitter to amplify that moment when people are really excited? And so Justin performed, and this ad aired.
That's exciting.
They used the hashtag #MoreJT. They could have done Target JT, but they actually wanted to just sort of host the conversation. They felt like they could hit people with their message once they sort of brought them into the room, if that makes sense. And they pushed this tweet out right after the commercial aired. And what you'll see is that they have the hashtag #MoreJT, which people are going to use after seeing the ad. They have the hashtag Grammys, which that audience is already using. And then they gave people the opportunity to purchase or watch #MoreJT. A really simple integration that delivered significantly for them. Their CMO has been quoted as talking about this being one of the most effective things they've done this year. And it's just thinking about how people behave and what happens. And again, they got people when they were excited and said, want to buy this? So that kind of thinking, and again, bottom line, that worked for them. We also know with sporting events, there's sort of this buildup, and there's this rivalry, and there's different players and different teams, and there's a lot of emotion that surrounds that on Twitter. And so Telstra here in Australia actually sort of contributed to that conversation. And what they did is they invited people to participate and rewarded them with custom artwork, where their profile pictures were featured in these different designs, so it made people feel special. They used some of their relationships with celebrity athletes to promote it and created clever videos. And then they tracked how people representing the different teams tweeted and interacted on the platform to show which team was winning. So sort of just, again, building a gaming experience on top of that conversation that's already happening around sports. That additive layer, connecting people who might not necessarily know that they should be connected, but they're all rooting for the same, or they're all rooting against the same team. and if they can amplify that's valuable.